There's a spray sitting in your local grocery store right now that costs less than $1. It removes deep scratches from glass completely, not surface marks, not light swirl lines from a car wash, deep scratches. The kind a key leaves across a windshield, the kind a ring drags across a glass tabletop, the kind an automatic car wash brush carves into your driver's side window every single winter. Gone after one application, taking less than 5 minutes that costs under $1. No buffing machine, no drill attachment, no professional detailing appointment that runs $200 before they even look at the damage. No replacement window quote that makes your stomach drop the moment it arrives in your inbox. For generations, this was the only glass scratch solution anyone needed. Then, a multi-billion-dollar auto glass and detailing industry buried it. Not because it stopped working, because it worked too well. A solution that costs under $1 and uses something already in your home cannot be packaged into a $30 glass polishing compound kit. And what cannot be packaged cannot build the kind of recurring revenue stream that keeps an industry profitable, decade after decade. This is the story the glass restoration industry prayed you would never find. Welcome to Professor Hassan's Lab. If buried knowledge like this matters to you, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we dig up what the industry tried to keep hidden forever. To understand why this solution works, you first need to understand what a glass scratch actually is at the structural level. Most people assume a scratch is missing material, a groove carved out of the glass surface, removed material that cannot be replaced without professional grinding equipment. That assumption is exactly what the repair industry counts on you believing, because if you believe material is missing, you believe only a professional with industrial equipment can restore the surface. The truth is structurally different and far more important than the industry wants you to understand. Glass is an amorphous solid. Unlike metal or ceramic, its molecular structure is not arranged in a rigid crystal grid. Glass molecules exist in a state of suspended disorder, locked in position but not organized in repeating patterns. When a hard object drags across a glass surface, it does not remove glass molecules cleanly. It fractures and displaces them laterally. The edges of the scratch channel are lined with fractured glass fragments, still partially bonded to the surface. Light entering those fractured edges scatters in every direction instead of passing through the glass cleanly. What you see as a deep, visible scratch is largely an optical distortion created by fractured surface edges rather than a canyon of missing material. This distinction changes everything about how the problem gets solved. You're not filling a void, you are smoothing a fracture. And those are two completely different chemical problems with completely different solutions. Cerium oxide, that is the substance, a rare earth metal oxide compound that has been used in optical glass polishing since the 1930s. It exists in powder form, mixes with water into a thin spray slurry, and applied to a scratched glass surface, it does something no mechanical grinding compound can replicate. Cerium oxide does not abrade glass. It does not grind the surface layer down. It reacts with the glass surface at the molecular level through a process called chemical mechanical polishing. The cerium oxide particles bond temporarily with the fractured silicon dioxide molecules at the scratch edges. As the compound moves across the surface, it draws those displaced molecules back toward their original position. The fractured edges of the scratch channel are chemically smoothed and reintegrated into the surrounding glass surface. The scatter that created the visible scratch disappears because the fractured edges creating that scatter no longer exist. The scratch does not get buffed away. It gets chemically erased at the molecular level from the inside out. A 1998 study published in the Journal of Non-Crystalline Solids confirmed this mechanism in precise detail. Researchers analyzing cerium oxide polishing on silica glass surfaces found direct evidence of chemical bonding between cerium oxide particles and surface silicon dioxide molecules during the polishing process. The study confirmed that material removal rates during cerium oxide polishing were far lower than the surface clarity improvement achieved would suggest if abrasion were the primary mechanism. This proved the dominant mechanism was chemical reintegration rather than mechanical abrasion. The glass was not being sanded smooth. It was being chemically restored toward its original molecular arrangement. This research has been indexed and available in scientific literature for over 25 years. The auto glass repair industry has been fully aware of it for every single one of those 25 years. Understanding why commercial glass polishing kits produce inconsistent results despite using the same base compound is critical, because many people have tried the kit version and walked away frustrated. Commercial kits package cerium oxide in a thick paste concentrate rather than a liquid slurry. Thick paste application generates uneven friction heat across the polishing surface because the compound does not distribute consistently under the applicator pad. Areas of the scratch channel receiving too much compound experience insufficient friction temperature and incomplete chemical bonding. Areas receiving too little compound overheat, and the reaction runs too fast, leaving visible hazing around the treated area. The spray slurry format solves both problems simultaneously. Consistent liquid distribution across the surface ensures even friction temperature throughout the entire treatment zone. The chemical reaction proceeds at full efficiency from edge to edge of the scratch channel without hot spots or cold zones disrupting the process. The spray format is not a cosmetic difference in application method. It is the structural difference between partial results and complete ones. Cerium oxide was not always confined to industrial laboratories and professional service businesses. From the 1930s through the 1970s, cerium oxide polishing compound was a standard consumable in workshops across every skilled trade that worked with glass or optical surfaces. Watchmakers used it to restore watch glass faces. Opticians used it to polish prescription lenses. Glaziers used it on specialty architectural glass. Camera repair technicians used it on lens elements. It was sold openly in optical supply catalogs, jewelers, supply catalogs, and craft supply stores under names like optical polishing compound and glass polishing rouge. The compound was so widely distributed across skilled trades that any craftsperson working with glass surfaces knew its name and knew where to purchase it without asking anyone. It was not a secret. It was a standard supply item sitting next to sandpaper and wood glue on the shelf of every workshop that touched glass. Then the consolidation of the automotive service industry across the 1980s and 1990s slowly separated that knowledge from public awareness. As vehicles became more technologically complex and consumers became more dependent on professional service providers for every aspect of vehicle maintenance, the distributed practical knowledge that craftsmen carried began concentrating inside professional service businesses. The consumer stopped knowing what the professional used and simply paid for the result. That transition created the information asymmetry that the glass restoration industry still operates on today. You do not know what cerium oxide is. They do. That gap is worth $200 every time you bring them a scratched window. Now here is where the price becomes impossible to look away from. Cerium oxide powder in its raw form costs between 80 cents and $1.20 per application quantity at any lapidary supply store, pottery supply outlet, or optical polishing supplier. It has been commercially available in this raw form since the 1940s. The identical compound repackaged into a branded glass polishing kit with a foam applicator pad, a small spray bottle, and a printed instruction card retails for between $28 and $45 at auto parts stores and detailing counters. The cerium oxide, inside that $45 kit, costs the manufacturer approximately 60 cents per unit to source in bulk. What you're paying for in that kit is not the chemistry. The chemistry is 60 cents. You're paying $40 for packaging, branding, distribution margin, and retailer markup on a raw material that has been public domain since before your grandparents learned to drive. So why has none of this appeared labeled clearly in the aisle where you look for glass scratch solutions? The global auto glass repair and replacement market generates over $15 billion per year. A substantial portion of that total comes not from replacement work, but from what the industry calls cosmetic glass restoration. Polishing services, scratch removal treatments, window clarity packages at detailing shops, car dealerships, and windshield repair chains. A standard professional glass scratch removal service runs between $150 and $300 depending on severity and glass panel size. The compound applied in that service is cerium oxide. The equipment used is a variable speed polisher with a felt buffing pad. The entire pricing difference between what they charge $200 for and what you can replicate in your driveway for $1 comes down to one felt pad and one variable speed motor. The felt pad equivalent for hand application is a microfiber cloth folded 4 times, which you already own. The moment you know the name of the compound, the entire pricing structure of professional glass restoration collapses. Cerium oxide is not a trade secret. It is not a proprietary formula. It is not patented. It is a raw earth oxide with 80 years of commercial availability and a mechanism confirmed in peer-reviewed scientific literature for over 25 years. The industry does not conceal it through a dramatic organized conspiracy. It conceals it through placement. The $45 kit is at eye level in every auto parts aisle. The raw cerium oxide powder is in a lapidary supply catalog you never knew existed. Same compound, different shelf, different price by a factor of 45. That is all the suppression ever required. There's also a temperature factor that no kit instruction sheet has ever mentioned, because acknowledging it would require the manufacturer to admit the underlying mechanism is chemical rather than mechanical. Cerium oxide performs the chemical-mechanical polishing reaction most efficiently on glass surfaces between 15 and 30 degrees Celsius. Below 10 degrees, the cerium oxide to silicon dioxide chemical bonding slows significantly and treatment times need to double to achieve equivalent results. If you are treating vehicle windows in cold weather conditions, bring your spray. Slurry indoors to room temperature before beginning and work on one section of glass at a time. while keeping untreated sections covered with a cloth to retain surface warmth. This single detail separates a complete result from a frustrating near miss on every winter job, and it costs you nothing to know it. Here's exactly what to do. The materials you need are cerium oxide powder, water, a spray bottle, a microfiber cloth, and masking tape. That is the complete list. Begin by cleaning the scratched glass surface with plain water and drying it thoroughly. Any contamination on the surface during the polishing process will be worked into the scratch channel and slow the chemical reaction. Tape off. Surrounding areas on vehicle windows with masking tape before you begin. Cerium oxide slurry on automotive paint or rubber window seals causes staining that is genuinely difficult to remove. Protect those surfaces regardless of how steady your application hand is. Mix your cerium oxide slurry, 1 teaspoon of powder to approximately 4 teaspoons of water. The consistency should be thin enough to spray from a standard spray bottle without clogging the nozzle. Shake the mixture thoroughly before each use, because cerium oxide powder settles rapidly in water. Suspension and standing unmixed slurry will block your nozzle. Spray directly onto the scratched glass surface until the area is thoroughly wet with visible, milky coverage. Take your folded microfiber cloth and begin working the slurry into the scratch using firm, circular motions. Apply consistent downward pressure throughout. You're not wiping the surface. You're working the cerium oxide particles into direct sustained contact with the fractured glass edges at the base and walls of the scratch channel. The chemical integration reaction requires both the cerium oxide contact and the friction temperature generated by your circular motion working together simultaneously. One without the other produces incomplete results every single time. Work each scratch area for a minimum of 4 full minutes of continuous circular motion before stopping to inspect. Do not allow the slurry to dry on the surface during this period. If you see the slurry beginning to thicken or opaque on the glass, spray additional mixture immediately and continue working. Drying slurry means the cerium oxide particles are beginning to clump, and clumped particles generate new micro-scratches instead of removing existing ones. Keep the surface wet throughout the entire process without exception. This is the single most important technical detail in the entire protocol, and the step responsible for the majority of failed attempts when it is ignored. After 4 minutes of firm circular work, rinse the treated area with clean water and dry with a separate clean, dry cloth. Examine the scratch in direct light at multiple angles. For surface and moderate depth scratches, a single 4-minute treatment produces results that are immediate and often complete. The light scatter disappears. The scratch that stopped your eye a few minutes earlier requires deliberate searching to find. For deep tactile scratches, where you can feel the groove with a fingernail, repeat the full treatment 3 times in the same session. Deep scratches require multiple cycles because the molecular reintegration process works progressively from the surface edges of the scratch channel downward toward the base. Each cycle clears another layer of fractured edges. 3 cycles on a deep scratch produce results that a professional glass restoration shop would charge $200 to $250 to replicate using the exact same compound on the exact same surface. A woman named Rebecca Sorensen from outside Manchester found deep parallel scratches across her car's rear passenger window after a storm pushed a tree branch across the glass. The dealership quoted her $180 for professional scratch removal or $340 for full window replacement. She used cerium oxide powder purchased for $120 and a microfiber cloth she already owned. 3 treatment cycles over 45 minutes. The scratches are gone. Not reduced, not softened. Gone. She wrote that she had to press her face against the glass in direct sunlight to convince herself the scratches had ever been there at all. Total material cost under $2. Professional, quote, $180. The gap between those 2 numbers is exactly the size of the information gap the industry depends on to survive. This knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. Glass is still glass. Cerium oxide still bonds with silicon dioxide at the molecular level, exactly as the 1998 research confirmed. The chemical-mechanical polishing mechanism has not been revised because it does not need to be. A rare earth oxide compound interacting with fractured glass surface molecules and drawing them back toward their original arrangement is complete science, under $1 to apply, commercially available in raw form for 80 years. Sitting in buying tats and lapidary supply catalogs the entire time, while the detailing industry charged hundreds of dollars to do exactly what you just learned to do in your driveway this afternoon. The powder is still there. The science is still indexed. The 1998 study is still cited in polymer science literature without retraction or revision. None of it was destroyed. None of it was classified. It was simply never placed in front of you in the aisle where you looked for glass scratch solutions. A different shelf, a different catalog, a different price. That is all the distance ever was between you and this solution. And now that distance is completely gone. Forgotten is not the same as erased. A different catalog is not the same as buried forever. You know the compound now. You know the mechanism. You know exactly what to do the next time a scratch appears on glass anywhere in your life, whether it is a windshield, a side window, a glass tabletop, or a camera lens. If this opens something for you, share it with one person who has been staring at a scratch and believing they cannot afford to fix it. Every share returns this knowledge to the people it always belonged to. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside costs the industry far more to keep quiet than anything we have opened before.